Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Rainbow History Class. My name is Rudy Jean Rigg.
And I'm Hannah, and we've spent a lot of time together in the last couple of days.
Listen, I said goodbye to you yesterday. I said, I'll see you on Monday. And then you looked at me and said, no, you'll see me at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. And I thought, yep, that'd be about right.
That's right. We have been actually having a gorgeous country vacation. We went to Bendigo, which is a country town in regional Victoria, 2 hours from where we live, and we were doing a show at Bendigo Pride. But what we're trying to do this year is find joy in the travel. So we had a gorgeous time.
Yeah, I was going to say the last time we felt joy was at Disneyland last year.
Maybe true joy. We tried to match the Disneyland levels of joy in Bendigo, and we got close.
Yeah, I think we did. You know, Hannah and I, we travel a lot for work, and we're always just sort of like, I don't know. Listen, anyone that travels for work will understand what I'm saying. But it's like you get to a point where everything, you kind of just like don't like it anymore. And it's like, hang on, wait a second. I'm able to like go and try all these new things, have these new experiences whilst also like doing work and doing, work that I enjoy. And there is a point where you have to consciously decide to like lean in, which is I think what we did about halfway through our lake walk yesterday morning.
Yeah, we got up early. We went for a promenade around the lake. It was gorgeous. It's autumn, the leaves stunning. And yeah, we got coffees, walked around the lake. Then we went thrift shopping.
Very successful.
Very successful. I got 1.5 entire outfits for $20.
That's so good. I got a random bag and what I think is a dog collar, and I'm really happy about it.
Yeah, it was like, because the thing about country op shops is that they're not like raided by people like us.
No, and I think the selection is, it's unique in that different part. Like even in Melbourne, like if you go to enough op shops, you'll realize like the kind of clothes that routinely get taken there. Like Camberwell gets a lot of like formal wear, it gets a lot of work wear, but like designer or like high end. Whereas like, in Bendigo, there was a lot. Okay, hang on. Did you notice? I want to know, like this has been on my mind since we left yesterday. Did you notice the obscene amount of like scuba and wetsuits that they had despite being like 3.5 hours inland?
True. Yes, I did.
Did you? Or are you just saying that?
No, I did. I mean, I didn't then, but now that you've mentioned
there was just like racks and racks. And I was like, guys, where are you going with these?
Maybe lake skiing.
Oh, there was. Okay. They did have what is it called? Like a regatta?
Yeah. Like anything on the, I feel like lake sports are a thing.
Need wetsuits. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it gets bloody chilly.
It does, yeah. But look, we had a really great time in Bendigo.
Thank you to everyone who came out to see us at our Bendigo live show. It was really nice.
Yeah.
And it was really nice to meet and talk with you all after the show.
Yeah, it was the first time performing in a hall, which was really special. It was like a really beautiful hall. And it felt really cool being up on like a really raised stage. Like, I don't know, I just felt like quite, I wanted to like break out into like tap dance.
It was giving me Rocker Stedford vibes for sure.
Yeah. And you know what? It was actually the first time we've sold merch at a show, which I know you're probably like, what are you talking about? You don't sell merch normally. Like that's like a crime. And I would now agree with you. But for some reason, we just didn't do it. I think it's because like we were so worried about like doing a good job on stage. But now like we are like kind of in the swing of things. We brought a couple of boxes of merch and, people seem to love it. And I think it's something that like, we want to, do. Because I think we don't have our online shop at the moment. So the only way you can get merch is like if you come to one of our live shows. Which kind of makes it special because I don't think we're going to continue making the designs either.
Totally. I feel like this is our 7th episode. The podcast is going really, really well. I think, we've been having heaps of fun. So thank you so much for listening. And thank you so much for dropping us 5-star reviews on Spotify. Every star helps.
Yeah, it actually does.
And thank you to everyone who picked up a copy of the book at our show as well, I should say. The book and audiobook is also another great way to support us and what we do. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And as always, thank you to our Patreon subscribers as well. We have a really fun bonus episode of Detention coming your way.
Yeah, I'm not even going to spoil it. Sorry. You're just going to have to head over to Patreon. I know that's like such a tease, but.
Excellent. this episode kind of ties in to something that's happened, in the last couple of weeks, and I think surfaces a really important conversation in terms of what's happening in society at the moment, what's happening in our world. But before I get into it, I do want to say that this, in terms of like the episodes that we've done, this one is a little heavier. It does talk about some, really dark periods of history. And also I want to say that we will be using some terminology that is outdated, but very important for the period of time that we are going to be talking about. And so we just want you to, take care, and also, I guess, have that context that a lot of these some of these words we might not continue to use, but they were really important at that period of time, and that's why we're using them. So a little bit of just a heads up on that front. But getting into it, J.K. Rowling is back at it again.
Did she ever stop?
No. No. I mean, as somebody that has such a large, ornate estate, she could do well to just touch grass.
I feel like she maybe needs a holiday.
Yeah, she should just put the phone away, JK. No, she came at it again. And look, she never really does leave, but I feel like she does bubble up into the kind of the front pages periodically with another one of her increasingly alt-right wing perspectives and increasingly kind of radicalized right-wing perspectives.
Talk to me about this, because as a trans person, I had to switch her off. I had to say no more, and I deleted Twitter because Twitter was like, or X as it's called, it was just like recommending her tweets to me, and I was like, this is not it. So I actually don't know, and I knew that you were going to do this episode too, and I did not like school myself up because I just could not put myself in that sort of like can of worms. So can you just fill me in?
Totally. And I feel like the J.K. Rowling stuff is just going to be at the start, and then we're going to put her back in her box. I think as a community, it's all old news that we all really feel betrayed by some of the things that she says and who she's become or revealed herself to be all along based on, what we found in her work. And so we are going to, deal with her up front and then promptly throw her back in the bin.
Great.
So very recently, J.K. Rowling replied to a tweet or an X. The tweet said, the Nazis burnt books on trans healthcare and research. Why are you so desperate to uphold their ideology around gender? Great point. Great question. J.K. Rowling replied to this tweet and she said, I just ... How? How did you type this out and press send without thinking, I should maybe check my source for this because it might have been a fever dream? So it looks like J.K. Rowling is looking for a fact check, and that's what we're here to do today, is give her that fact check. Look, the short answer is, just because, we want to put this to bed, the Nazis absolutely did burn books on trans healthcare.
Oh, yeah.
The Nazis absolutely did persecute trans people. Up front, we're going to get into it, but like J.K. Rowling, unfortunately for you, I think you need to check some sources.
Like, how embarrassing. I'm sorry. But like the Nazis, like if name a thing the Nazis didn't like, I can pretty much guarantee you with no sources that they burnt a book about it. Like, if there was a book to be burnt, they burnt it. They had a real conniption about books.
Absolutely. And, what's interesting is that, again, conservative people, particularly in the US, are like literally using flamethrowers to torch books, to torch the Rainbow History Class book, which is great. This stuff's still happening. So I think, JK, please everybody tag her in this episode because she's obviously looking for a source. She's worried that it might have been a fever dream. Here you go. Here is the next 45 minutes or so explaining the whole thing to you. So J.K. Rowling, you got a bit of time on your hands. Tune in and hopefully maybe become our biggest fan. Anyway, so yes, short answer, they absolutely did burn books on trans healthcare. But the question that I want to start with here, I think in a sense more interesting, is firstly, there were books about trans healthcare back then. And secondly, what was in them?
I assume stuff about trans healthcare, but that's just me.
Yeah. You know what? Rudy, you're right. Class dismissed.
Yeah, it's done, dusted.
Get out of here. Yeah, I'm going to go deeper than just books about trans healthcare. But in order to kind of set the scene for this in terms of like locating ourselves within history, we're going back to the early 20th century or just slightly before in Germany, because this period of time compared to all other parts of Europe was really open and, you know, loving new ideas at this period. It was very progressive scientifically, socially, culturally, because Germany was a brand new country in 1900.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've never really thought about that before.
Yeah, Germany has only existed since 1871.
What was it before that?
So it was a bunch of Germanic states made up of Germanic peoples, but the most, I guess, notable was the Kingdom of Prussia.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Heard that word a million times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here we are in the Kingdom of Prussia. In 1871, what happened was these states, including the kingdom, unified into modern Germany. And the reason that this happened was it was really driven by the German people opposing the monarchy. All right, who was like all powerful. But instead, they really wanted democracy and freedom of speech. So that's what drove the unification of the German states and the birth of modern day Germany.
All right.
What this meant was that in Germany, new ideas that would have been censored in other parts of Europe, say like England, it would have been censored by monarchies. These ideas were able to be heard in Germany because of this freedom of speech.
Okay. So they were kind of like, no one else really around them was doing the whole democracy thing. Like they kind of like were like really fronting that.
Yeah. Like I guess, you know, there was civil governments in places like England, but in terms of like enshrining free speech, there was things in terms of like the church and the state arguing, but really the church still had a, you know, tremendous amount of control, and no one was really kind of pushing for free speech. You know, you could experience negative consequences for speaking freely in, you know, most of Europe before, you know, 1900s. What's interesting here is where we're going to get to is, you know who loves freedom of speech? J.K. Rowling. And
yeah,
what's interesting is I've been listening to this podcast. I got through like 2 episodes and then I was like, oh, I have a lot of criticism of this podcast. It's called The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling. And it really kind of goes through what she's experienced. And I think there was a bit of an interesting kind of parallel in terms of the censorship of J.K. Rowling by Christians for kind of promoting witchcraft. And now what they're saying is the censorship of J.K. Rowling for her views on trans people. There is a big false equivalence there, I would say. But what's interesting is that the whole podcast seems to be brought to you by a kind of like a not-for-profit or something that is all about promoting the freedom of speech and is like anti-cancel culture. I haven't looked too deeply into them, but I just think it's interesting that we're going back to this idea that, you know, permeates our society of protecting freedom of speech, because it was this freedom of speech thing that kind of led to a lot of the rights of trans people and homosexual people at this time kind of, you know, growing.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, when you're allowed to think, you're allowed to talk about things, you know. But then, of course, like it can be said for like evil and disgusting things as well. But, you know.
Totally. So here we have in Germany, free speech. Everyone was like really excited by that. Now, of course, there were limits. So Germany was still, you know, part of Christianized Europe, and like most of Christianized Europe, there was an anti-sodomy law. So in Germany, it was called Paragraph 175.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're all the same. You know, in England, there was like the Buggery Act. They're essentially the same. And, you know, thanks to colonization, those same anti-sodomy laws are still in existence in a lot of colonized countries.
Yeah.
So they had paragraph 175 in the penal code. However, there wasn't the same like moral panic around it as there was in other parts of Europe. They weren't really persecuting it. And given this new love of freedom of speech and new ideas, there actually became a growing movement of people talking about why it should be repealed. And those conversations were being had and, you know, able to be had freely in Germany at this time. So enter, I guess, the pin-up man for free speech at the time.
Okay.
Yeah, his name was Magnus Hirschfeld.
What a name. It just really gives me like comic vibes, like graphic novel. Could be like the Umbrella Academy sort of thing.
And he looks like that.
Oh, really? He's very like animated.
Yeah, and he's got these like beautiful kind of finely rimmed glasses and sits in this big plush chair.
I know the guy now,
kind of like somebody that would have created a radioactive.
Yeah.
Whenever I hear the name Magnus, I always just think of the film Matilda from 1996. This is like obviously being a lesbian.
Yeah.
Because, you know, Miss Honey was talking about Matilda's dad, who I believe. No, Miss Honey's dad was named Magnus.
Oh, my brain goes to like, I think it's called the Magnus Archives, which is like a podcast.
Who knows that we have such deep connections to the name Magnus?
Well, it's Magnus.
It's magnanimous. So this is Magnus Hirschfeld. So he was born in 1868 and in your favorite kingdom, the Kingdom of Prussia. So old mate Hirschfeld was Jewish.
Yep.
And also a homosexual.
Scandalous.
I know.
A to Z.
I know. And so soon after the Kingdom of Prussia became modern-day Germany, Magnus Hirschfeld formed the world's first homosexual rights organization, which he did.
Whoa.
Yeah. Guess which year?
Something's like calling 1904 to me.
Close, but even earlier, 1897.
Really?
Yeah.
So, okay. So it's like before 1897. Okay. Yeah. And what year did Germany become Germany?
1871.
Well, okay. So, because I was thinking like, you know, did this happen at like the height of the change? You know, a lot of stuff's happening. But like, you know, it's been like a decade or two.
Yeah. And he was obviously, I mean, he was only born in 1868. So this, you know, he had to
How old
grow
was
up.
he? Like 40?
No, you basically 1868 to 1897. So
30, early 30s.
I can't even do this math at this hour. You're going to have to just.
All right. So like he didn't leave his legacy till later in life. He really started off quite strong.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was called the Scientific Humanitarian Committee.
Wow.
I know. Good name.
Wow.
Great name.
Almost sounds fake.
And it has a motto. Just
I love a motto. Okay, what's the motto?
Okay, I'm going to have to speak some Latin. Per scientiam ad justinium.
Persistence and justice?
Close. It translates to through science to justice.
All right. Well, persistence through similar vibes. Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
you're not wrong.
My Latin is actually one of my stronger languages. So. Even though it's dead. R.I.P.
Yeah, I think again, if you're sort of thinking of this like kind of superhero kind of father character of Magnus Hirschfeld, like his scientific humanitarian committee does sound like something that
like Charles Xavier, the School for Gifted Children.
Yeah, it does really sound like that. Anyway, so he believed, Hirschfeld believed, and he did not come up with these ideas because he was building on the ideas of another German man named Karl Heinrich Ulrichs. More on that in the Rainbow History Class book, but we're just going to focus on Magnus today. And basically this was the idea that some people were hardwired to be attracted to the same sex.
Yeah.
Because up until this point, the idea of like sodomy wasn't really like something that homosexual people did. It was kind of like just a sin that anyone could find themselves in the midst of, which is kind of great.
We have this like in joke with our D&D campaign at the moment, which is like anything can be used for sodomy. And like, I don't know why it came up, but like it's kind of true in that like people were getting charged with sodomy for like random stuff. Like they weren't like, And it was so hard to prove, like, what, you're in the room with me or not? Like, what's going on here, fellas? Like,
definitely. And I think sodomy like covered a bunch of things other than, you know, anal penetration at different periods of time. I think like in Shakespearean times, you know, somebody was convicted of sodomy for dipping their penis into a glass of wine from a balcony.
yeah, which may or may not have happened, but the point still stands. Like, you know, wild things.
Anything can be sodomy if you put your mind to it.
That's exactly, anything can be sodomy.
So, yeah, and I also just kind of love there is something kind of radically inclusive, I think, about sodomy was just a sin that anyone could like fall victim to. Like it wasn't for, you know, gay people or anything like that. It was just kind of like I was swayed by the devil and sodomized.
Yeah. Well, like that's it. And this is, I feel like, one of my biggest gripes. And I feel like we should now quote this when someone asks us for like our favorite fact about queer history, is that like sodomy isn't actually just for gay people. It's like such a big misconception. It's like anyone can be a sodomite.
It's
like,
true. All you have to do is sodomy.
Yeah.
And then you too can be a sodomite.
Like literally, like,
it's so true.
Interpretation of the law, as they say, is a very grey area.
Absolutely. And like, I think, you know, this was the first time though that, you know, there became this idea that, you know, some people were more predisposed to sodomy than others because of something innate within themselves. And that was not seen as like a demonizing thing. This was ideas coming from, you know, progressive gay people that said, you know, this is part of my innate nature and therefore it shouldn't be punished.
Yeah.
You know, it was part of like the being that I guess God made. And so therefore it's innate. We can't help it. Basically born this way. So Hirschfeld believed this. He also looked to history. He was like, you know, occasionally throughout history you get these like little peaks where people look to queer history before them. So the ancient Greeks to kind of think, okay, well, actually we shouldn't be criminalizing queer people because, you know, the ancient Greeks, they do everything right. Not really, but people like to think that they did. So he did that. And he also was like the first Western person to delineate between sexuality and gender.
Yeah, because that's something that like gets lost a lot of the time when we think about colonization of groups of people.
Totally. I mean, I think, again, yeah, this is, if you look at Indigenous cultures, there's, you know, many kind of, well, there are constellations of different genders and different meanings attached to them and how people experience genders. So I'm definitely looking at this from kind of like a Eurocentric lens. And he was this first person that started to question this idea that gender and sexuality were different. Before this, that people had a range of gender expressions, but if they were seen cross-dressing, that was seen as kind of a symptom of homosexuality.
Yeah. I mean, people still have that idea now. I find it, especially, I think now I've seen a lot of like conflation between looking masculine as a woman and then that equal being a lesbian. And not even like bi, just like you're a lesbian.
Yeah. Which I think, you know, from most of the 90s, that was the idea that the media told. I also think something that people still get confused with is, you know, sometimes, you know, you'll know someone who transitions and then, you know, they're in a sort of same-sex relationship and people are like, what? So if you see a trans woman who's dating another woman, people are always a bit like, hang on, no, you're supposed to be with guys because, you know, they still kind of will conflate the idea of gender or somebody being maybe a trans woman with being like a gay man.
Yeah.
So it still does happen.
Yeah.
And Hirschfeld was one of the first people to say, no, these things are different. He was also part of the bourgeois elite. So when we look at this and freedom of speech,
how can you be bourgeois? Oh, no, we're not talking about bourgeoisie, are we?
We are.
How can you – wait, isn't that middle class?
No, so like the bourgeoisie at this period of time were these kind of thinkers and –
Oh, okay. You
can have the bourgeoisie having different social standings depending on the time and how they're kind of
I think I'm thinking of 17th century France. Sorry. Just
maybe,
ignore me.
but in this period of time, like this was the bourgeoisie were kind of scientists, lawyers,
Sorry.
people experienced in the humanities, but they also had like a social standing and they were influential. So when we talk about freedom of speech, the reason I'm including this is because there's this caveat that it's not like any person in Germany at this time could just start coming up with new ideas and spreading them. You know, he did have kind of a privilege of an influential social standing. Okay, so that is old mate Magnus,
Great.
all right, and how he came to have these ideas and how they make sense in the context of a very new Germany and what was important in society at that time. If we go to 1919, right.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yep. 1919, Germany entered a new era of government called the Weimar Republic, right? Yeah. Okay. So the Weimar Republic is known for being a particularly interesting era in 20th century European history.
Yeah.
Because it was a period of science and artistic and social, cultural freedom and expression, but at the same time, kind of political turmoil and economic destruction.
Yeah. I don't know when this happened, but when I hear the word Weimar Republic, I just think of this time in high school where my history teacher thought it appropriate to really hammer home the impact of inflation, to which like there was some kind of physical demonstration of like 1 franc, was it? Like that's the
Papier mark.
Papier, yeah. 1 equals like a bajillion, and like you would need to like bring a bajillion of these things to buy a loaf of bread. And then he was like, and then they just started burning the money. And I just remember that so clearly in my head. I'm like, burning money? Holy crap.
Actually, that's exactly right. Like the reason for this was because after World War I, Germany was left with this like crippling reparations debt. So they had to pay all of these reparations. And it was so much money that it triggered hyperinflation. So here around the world, where like right here in Australia, we're dealing with inflation. Hyperinflation is that on steroids. So what that would mean is that like newly minted papier marks would lose their value within hours. So you could...
Whoa, it's worse than like Dogecoin. I'm just pulling a cryptocurrency out my ass, but yeah.
Actually, it's kind of the same thing. So basically, you could go and do a day at work and then get, let's say, 100 papier marks for that. And that on that day might have been, you know, enough money to get, let's just say like lunch and dinner, right? By the next morning, that money that you had earned yesterday was only enough money to get lunch.
And who was in control of this? Like, was someone sitting there being like, yeah, raise it up, now drop it back? Like,
no, this is the thing. It just kind of happens economically unless, you know, different levers are pulled by governments and things. But there was political turmoil, and also the government was in disarray because they had to pay all these reparations. So there wasn't anything that could be done.
Oh my God, they were just running loosey-goosey.
So what would you do if you did a day at work and you earned $100?
Yeah.
And then by tomorrow morning, that $100 would only be worth the same amount as like $50. What would you do?
Like, can you, like, what would I do, like, with that money? Or what would I? Well, I mean, I think part of me is like, well, I would just spend it like as soon as I got it, unless I thought that the price was going to increase the next day. This sounds bad, but like, let's say given I'm in this, like, it's not modern day. Like if I was actually at the time as a time traveler gone back, I would probably start trying to swindle money from my job. Like if I was a time traveler and I went back in time to this and I'm like, all right, fellas, like how am I going to make the best of this situation? I would just steal.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's great.
Like, I know there's a very practical answer.
That's a practical answer, but you kind of hit the nail on the head with your first answer, which is you just spend it.
Well, I know, because that's what happened. But
yeah. Okay, there you go. So you do know what happened. So people, knowing that the money that they bought, that they earned today would be worth like nothing by tomorrow, they spent it as quickly as possible.
I feel like there is a case to say that like you could do like the paperclip trick in like you like scale up. Because, okay, put it
What's
this way,
the
right?
paperclip trick?
It's like, I think Vice actually did it. Like they just like went to like a festival and like traded
Oh,
up.
that's right, to get a house or something.
I would just like invest the money into an asset and then take that physical, it would have to be like a physical asset, and just try and use that as a bartering piece instead of the actual currency. So it's like how NFT fails. Again, I'm speaking as someone who actually has no idea how like cryptocurrency and FTs work, but like I would go, okay, crap, like, okay, I've got this amount of money. I don't know if it's going to be worth that amount tomorrow. I'm going to buy a jet ski and then I'm going to use that and I'm going to assign a value to my jet ski and then like trade up that way.
Yeah, totally. I mean, when, Russia invaded the Ukraine and, were being hit with sanctions and, yeah, their economy went into disarray, people in Russia were buying Chanel handbags because they were seen as a better store of money than money.
Yeah.
And so that makes total sense. And so in this period of time, what they did was they needed to spend it in the evening. These were average people that didn't have your incredible like fiscal planning skills. So what they did was they blew it. They blew it in bars, and that created this like idea of hedonism. You had to spend your money. So things like bars, sex workers, just drugs, anything to kind of get your money out and have fun because the world's going to shit.
Because didn't they like, and this is me just like really trying to dig deep into like my high school experience. That created an opioid crisis, didn't it?
That I'm actually not sure about, but the drugs were very strong, and I believe there's a lot of writing from the time that spoke about how good quality the drugs were.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, again, like these things happen, with hyperinflation. People feel like, okay, cool, well, we got to live like it's the last day on earth kind of thing. Cabaret came because that was kind of the hedonism and indulgence. It kind of combined everything, from sex and music, alcohol, like drugs. This idea of going to the cabaret was what people did. And so it was like a time where people were enlightened, all of a sudden.
Oh, yeah.
Repressed Victorian kind of attitudes towards sexuality went out the window. We were into kind of like everything, sex, drugs, rock and roll.
Get those ankles out, baby.
Absolutely. And gay bars started popping up, which was like really new, and excitingly for me in the 1930s or 1920s, lesbian bars started. There were lesbians. And just lesbians. The invention of lesbians was one of the best inventions of history. No, lesbian bars started popping up everywhere in Berlin. And so the cool thing here is that, like lesbians who wear butch fashion or wear butch clothing have always mostly been derided throughout history for, committing fashion crimes.
I mean, objectively, yes. Subjectively, I obviously don't agree with that, but yeah.
Yeah, well, in like the 1920s, under this Weimar Republic era in Germany, lesbians would, dress in butch fashion and inspire like heaps of other women to dress in butch ways, things like waistcoats and tailored pants, things like that. These lesbians were called Bubies. which meant
what?
I know,
like,
which meant
spell that. Is it BOUBOU?
No, BUBIS, which meant little boys.
BUBIS.
Yeah.
It meant little boys.
Yeah, because they were dressing like little boys.
I don't know what's worse, being called a boobie or being called a little boy.
I don't know, but essentially it meant butch, and they were very fashionable. So hopefully that gets over being called a boobie. So here we've got so this just sounds like what a time to be alive. Given that the Weimar Republic couldn't exactly like hang its hat on the economy at this period of time, they were like, what can we do? What can we do? Science.
Yes.
Right? So scientific communities were, also heading to the cabaret and doing all sorts of things there. So they began pushing for the repeal of paragraph 175.
That's a weird hill to die on, but why?
Well, I guess this idea of scientific inquiry and like an interest in
Required free
sex,
speech. Okay.
like I guess an acceptance of sex, and a liberation of attitudes. All of these people were probably just like having great sex, getting laid.
They were just really horny.
Yeah.
It's always the nerds. The nerds are the horniest.
It's true, like in every high school. And so I guess these sexual freedoms and things, you know, these scientific communities were pushing for, one, like the decriminalization of homosexuality, but also other things like birth control and the decriminalization of sex work, obviously, because they could spend all their money with sex workers.
Yeah. Because that could be charged as sodomy. And not that they had like sodomy laws, but like, I mean, they kind of did, but like.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
that's another thing that could be sodomy, for sure. And abortion as well.
Yeah, all of that sodomy behavior.
So all of that sodomy stuff was being, these scientific activists were trying to repeal.
Yeah, okay, for sure.
So this like laid the perfect groundwork. So if we go back to old mate Magnus Hirschfeld,
Big MG.
our king, this is where he really like takes center stage. All right, this is the time for his opus, his Magnus opus, if you will.
Oh my God. How long have you been sitting on that?
Like not even at all. It just came to me.
Oh my God.
As I said it. His Magnus opus, which was something called the Institute for Sexual Sciences.
I remember having to say this first in a video like a couple of years ago, and then.
Are you going to say it now?
Wait, can I see the word?
Yeah, you can.
I don't know if I can I don't know if I can do this as good as I did it the first time. Okay, all right, everyone. I'm gonna try and say this word, which you can hear me say appropriately in the audiobook. But okay, Institute for. Okay, this has not got any kind of accent laden on top, just so we're clear. Institute for Sexual Wissenschaft, and that's as good as it's gonna get today. So there you go, everyone. A little tasty tidbit of some German language there.
I give it a 4.
All right, you go then. Come on. Your turn.
Institute for Sexual Wissenschaft.
You said it exactly the same way as me.
I give myself a 4.
Okay.
I give myself a 4. So this happened. This was founded by Hirschfeld in 1919, first year of the Weimar Republic.
Yeah.
And it was the first of its kind of research center into sex and human sexuality. Basically gave birth to the field of sexology.
Okay. Is that field now defunct?
No.
Or?
It's just the study of sexuality.
Oh my! How am I so stupid? Like literally, one of my friends does this. Ignore me.
Yeah, it's basically the study of sexuality.
Yeah,
and like this institute legitimized it as like an academic field.
Thank God.
I know. And so Magnus, he did heaps of research at this institute. And one of the things that he did while he was there was he coined the term transvestite.
Okay, cool.
So transvestite at the time, he used to describe what we would now see as a transgender person.
Wait, okay, so hang on, backtrack. I just want a little bit of etymology on the word there. So transvestite is a German word. Is that like, because are we talking about, is transvestite the English translation of the German word? Like I know that I'm like digging into this now.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. It's not.
Is?
Yeah.
Okay, so
it's the anglicized version.
Now I'm playing devil's advocate. Can you
want me
really
to find the German word for transvestite?
If J.K. Rowling is judging the quality of our sauciness, I just want to get it right that we cannot be misquoted saying, you know. So it's like, what term did he actually coin?
Transvestite.
Oh, so just
like it's got an E on it.
All right, okay. I'm just checking.
Yeah, that's good.
Could you imagine if the translation was just bad? Like,
yeah, no. I feel like it's just a straight anglicized word.
All right.
It's kind of how like the word homosexual is an anglicized version of a Hungarian word.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So JK, I just did your homework for you. You're welcome. Let's carry on.
Okay, here we go. So he coined this term transvestite because he believed that sexuality, gender was also a spectrum. Now this is where like Magnus kind of gets it a little wrong, but also like go off for the time you were onto something. He believed that gender was a spectrum that ranged from absolute man to absolute woman.
Is this kind of like Nietzsche's like what's his thing? What's his super
Ubermensch?
Ubermensch, like
Kind of.
vibes?
Kind of. I mean, he just believed the thing is that Magnus Hirschfeld did a lot of these studies from the idea that are very kind of stereotypical or cliched or kind of reductive ideas of what makes a man and what makes a woman. So like, you know, feminine traits, you know, being quite stereotypical, and masculine traits, you know, strength and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Absolute man, absolute woman was this spectrum. So, you know, obviously we know there's no such thing as an absolute man or an absolute woman, but
not unless you're sponsored by Absolute Vodka. And then
talk to us, Absolute Vodka. We need a sponsor. We'll be absolute. Will you be an absolute binary gender for a price?
Fuck yeah. Sure.
Okay, great. All right, so this was kind of a good step in terms of delineating between the two. And he believed that transvestites were legitimate and, you know, basically a legitimate identity.
Yeah.
Which now seems obvious, but back then it was not.
Like he's having his little tiny mind blown.
He is. And so at the Institute, he was doing all sorts of really cool things. Like he was doing research into HRT. And so he was kind of developing the first hormone replacement therapies.
Okay.
And he also was overseeing some of the very first gender affirmation surgeries.
Yeah. Was it him that did the surgery on, what was her name, Lily?
I don't believe so. I think that was like the
fabricated.
Yeah, no. I think these were early surgeries that were not like considered the same procedures that we would consider gender affirmation surgeries today. Oh
no, but like that I'm like kind of referencing that movie with Eddie,
the Danish girl.
Yeah, I thought was that just fake in the movie?
No, the Danish girl.
I'm so confused.
The Danish girl. All right, we're going to have to cut out a little bit of this typing.
I think the ambient noise is nice.
Ambient noise is
shows people it's real. No, I don't know.
So you're talking about Lily Elbe.
Yeah.
No, you're actually right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're actually right. Lily Elbe was a patient at the Institute.
Yeah.
And so her surgeries were, I guess, things that aren't done kind of in the same procedurally as they are now, but like things like the removal of the testicles and things like that. And then later there was a bunch of other surgeries as like things started to progress that she was able to access. And so, yeah, it was really, really early kind of procedures, but Magnus Hirschfeld at this institute did these and pioneered them, and you know, different people and academics and scientists from Europe would go and visit him and learn.
That's cool.
So when we look at trans healthcare that might have been in this books, these were really incredible scientific, I guess, pieces of research and academic inquiries. So very, very cool. Not only this, Magnus Hirschfeld did something I love. There was such thing as a transvestite pass, which was given to trans people at the institutes that basically let local authorities, the police, know that they were legitimate transgender people or transvestites, and not people kind of causing public nuisance, which was a crime that you could be arrested for.
Oh my God. It's all right, officer. I'm a legal silly goose.
Actually, yes, it was like a hall pass.
Yeah.
For trans people, and they looked like that. There was like a piece of paper and it said, you know, blah, blah is a legitimate transvestite.
All right.
Basically, don't arrest them for, you know, cross-dressing or being a public nuisance because they're a legitimate transvestite. Signed Magnus Hirschfeld, and it was like a slip of paper.
What a body politics nightmare.
I know.
Like, oh my God.
I know. There's one of these things where I love it because at the time it's like very, very rudimentary and certainly not something that we would do today or see needed. And if anything, I feel like we're at the opposite problem where a lot of people are being, you know, forced to prove that they're, you know, trans. So therefore these might be called on for the wrong reasons. But at that time, it was great because it basically intercepted a lot of kind of, I guess, criminalization of trans people at the time.
Yeah.
And I just kind of like the idea of having a trans hall pass.
I mean, I can print you one if you want it.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Print your own, write your own.
I know.
Basically, it's like my note from school.
Yeah. No, miss, I can't do sport. I've got a note. And you've written it yourself.
Yeah. No, miss, I can't. I'm too trans.
Yeah.
I'm too gay for this.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. Obviously, this isn't to say that he could do everything to like reduce the burden on trans people in the 1920s. It's not like they had great employment opportunities. But what he did do was he employed a lot of trans people that were staying with him at the institute as well. So he was able to give them employment as well as, things like HRT. That's surgeries should they want them, and then also kind of prevent them from falling afoul of the law at the time. So it was pretty cool.
Do we know why he was so interested in this sort of stuff? Because, as far as we are aware, he himself wasn't trans. He was just like a gay guy. But he was just like really passionate. I guess
he was interested, and I think what he was interested in was because one of his diaries recorded him meeting with somebody who was a cross-dresser and being surprised that that person wasn't gay.
Okay. And that kind of piqued his interest.
Because he was like, oh, hang on, you're acting in a way, or you're expressing yourself or presenting in a way that we've always assumed is like a homosexual, but your attraction doesn't match that. You're not gay.
Yeah. And so, we can't assume this because obviously the books got burnt, but did he sort of go, oh, well, if you're cross-dressing or your gender expression doesn't match your like sex or pronouns, whatever, like he was using as his kind of like backbone, did he just then assume that people were trans? Or was he kind of just like, come to me with your woes and I'll sort you out?
No. He wasn't kind of pathologizing these people insofar as he was kind of starting sexology, and he's kind of looking at, all right, well, what makes somebody homosexual? What makes somebody hardwired to be attracted to the same sex? Hang on, this person feels gay but isn't gay. I'm just going to be interested and talk to that person. And then that's how he came up with the idea that like sexuality and gender were different things.
You know what I find funny? And this is not me like devalidating him at all, but it's like, this is like a white European colonized man. Like, talk to someone from a different background, talk to an Indigenous person, talk to and you probably would have figured that you didn't need to like dedicate. I mean, great that you did. Not saying it wasn't great, but you could have learned a lot just from talking to someone from a different background.
I feel like so many scientists could have benefited from doing that throughout history.
It should be a prerequisite.
So this is the 1920s. That is basically what was going on at the time. If we jump forward to the fall of the Weimar Republic, this happened in 1933. And
wow, short-lived.
Yeah, it was short-lived. And who took over? The Nazi Party.
I just have no words, yeah.
They were very successful, right? Because even though there was this scientific inquiry and all of these sort of new freedoms for, I guess, progressive liberal people, there were a lot of people that were suffering because of the economy. And essentially, Hitler was very successful in being able to say, I'm going to make Germany great again. Oh, who does that sound like?
Oh, I don't know. Do they wear a red hat?
Yeah. He was successful, in leading this National Socialist Party, which was kind of, all about for Germany and kind of, getting it back together and things like that. He was this real nationalism that managed to get that party elected.
Wow.
So in 1933, the Weimar Republic has fallen, the Nazi Party is in, and that is the same year, J.K. Rowling, that is the same year a group of Nazi youth called the German Student Union looted the Institute for Sexual Sciences and set fire to the library.
Yeah.
And Magnus Hirschfeld was on a speaking tour at the time outside of Germany. He was not there. But what they did was essentially there are photos of it. They took all of the books and they set fire to them. And it was actually the first book burning of the Third Reich.
Yeah.
So it was like the very first one. And what was in that library, but all of this research into transgender healthcare, as well as other things like, contraception and, abortion and all of these other kinds of health issues. So Hitler hated Jewish people as well as other ethnic groups, but he also hated anyone that would threaten his Aryan race.
Okay, hang on, time out. Like, what gets me is like people forget that they were like super, super into eugenics. Like, I forget that. I don't know. Like, it's just like, just stop and think about it. These people were eugenicists. Like, they were like buck wild.
Yeah, they were trying to create a master race. And so they hated anyone that would threaten that. So that includes gay men and lesbians because, those people weren't procreating and therefore useful in creating this master race. So Hitler came in and he revoked all the transvestite passes.
Did he just personally go and cut them in half?
Yeah, he did. He went around and he said, "Can I see your whole pass?" Was presented and he just like snapping a credit card in half. No, he revoked all of them. Then he went and relooked at paragraph 175 and he made it harsher, broader, so that he could persecute more men underneath it. And so he sent gay men and lesbians as well as trans people, as we'll get to in a sec, to concentration camps.
Yeah.
Now, given that trans people were not seen as legitimate by the Nazis, they were seen only as their sex assigned at birth. So what that meant was that we actually don't have heaps of documentation of trans people in like concentration camps or in the Holocaust because their trans identities were completely removed. So they were all treated as either gay men or lesbians.
Yeah.
Gay men wore the pink triangle, lesbians most likely the black triangle.
Yeah, it's like in the modern day Australian census.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. Exactly. So there was like more recently a civil lawsuit.
Recently?
Yeah. Like it happened. There was a civil lawsuit that proved trans people were persecuted in the Holocaust because that was being denied. And so.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So basically what happened was it ended up going to court to essentially establish the fact in court that trans people were persecuted, tried as gay men and, also, ended up in concentration camps. And so that is on record after an online debate denying this. And so whether or not, now we come back to J.K. Rowling where we started it, whether or not she would consider a fact check to be, the countless academics, historical documents, and really any of the work of Magnus Hirschfeld. And what's interesting is that while she's denying this, she's also a very outspoken person for women's rights. Please see the quotation marks I've got in my head. She's very outspoken for things like, abortion and, birth control. Yeah. Those things, part of the same library, part of the same book burning. So whether or not, she would see any of this published academia as a source or a fact check, maybe she could also look to the legal record because it has been established in the court that trans people were persecuted in the Holocaust. It seems obvious to us, but I really just wanted to end this story with what it seems that J.K. Rowling was after on the very remote chance, but I hope that she does end up listening to this episode on the remote chance that she listens to it.
I just think that it's silly when people say things like this. I'm like, actually put your critical hat on, champ.
Maybe she needs to, just pause because it could have been a fever dream.
Maybe she was having the fever dream.
I think she might have been having the fever dream. But if we were to go and wrap this up, what happened to Hirschfeld? While he was not only homosexual, he was Jewish.
Oh,
and so Germany was not safe for him and he knew that. He moved to France and he settled in Nice, and he was in the middle of setting up a new institute there, but he died actually on his birthday. And so his ashes were placed in a tomb, and there was this like concrete slab on top that read "Per Scientiam ad Justitiam," which was the motto of his very first homosexual rights organization. Yeah, through science to justice. So there, J.K. Rowling, eat that. That's how I want to end it.
I was going to suggest maybe she needs to do some Willem Hof.
Wim Hof.
That's his name. Wim Hof breathing exercises or something. I know they really helped me out, so maybe she can do that. Yeah, that's the thing. I think, you know, when you examine history, you've got to really be critical. You've got to really think about all of the details that would add up to a story and kind of look at it that way. I think that when we do get laser focused on something, it's important to like spread that laser out and just consider things like, you know, what were people wearing? What was acceptable to wear? What was acceptable to say? Like, you know, that even like that sort of thing, like really does help paint a better picture of what was going on. You know, even the cost of bread. Like it really does, like it sounds silly and it sounds like that's so anecdotal, but like it really does help like draw that together, like the strings of a story and the strings of like what actually happened. But I just think there was a freaking picture of it. Like, I'm sorry. Like I'm a bit speechless. Again, like I did not look into this at all because I saw that tweet from her and I was like, I simply cannot like, but it is really important for us to sit here and go through what actually happened and what is on record. And of course, as we know, like trans people have existed for the entirety of the human existence. And you know, it'll continue to be that way because as I demonstrated in the gay whale episode, you know, we're just here. We're just vibing and there's nothing wrong with that, nothing unnatural about that. You've already said some choice words to JK, so I'm not going to say them, but.
Totally. I feel like as well, just so much the reason we do this is because history, we look at history because it's so relevant to today. And there's so many things in our society, from the price of bread, from inflation, from like nationalism that are happening at the moment. And they are affecting everyone, but they're affecting trans people. And that is why there's like an eerie echo between, you know, we're talking about a century, you know, every 100 years or so, we see these things happen. 100 years ago, we need to be looking more at that period of time and finding these parallels and looking at what these people who are denying what happened then are denying today. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, thank you for coming along this journey with me.
Thanks for telling it. It's kind of very refreshing to not be the trans person telling these things. So I appreciate it.
And I also am like happy to get into TERF Twitter so that you can stay as far away from it as possible. And hey, like, please keep listening. If you do like the podcast, let us know. We really want to hear from you. You can check out our socials.
But more than that, let other people know. I love it when people get in our DMs and they tell us how much they enjoy what we do.
So true.
But at the end of the day, if you love it, the chances are there's 10 more people that love it and probably your friends would like it too. So share it around and yeah, like it really helps us survive. If you have some spare change rattling around, instead of rolling around, I guess change does roll around, but anyway, if you've got some money in your pockets, feel free to head over to our Patreon and see if that tickles your fancy. We do some exclusive content over there, like Hannah mentioned at the top of the show. But yeah, more than that, thank you for like making this possible, because without people being interested in this and having the same interests and passions as us, we wouldn't really be doing this. So yeah, really appreciate it. I mean, it's been quite a few years now, so it's so nice to, you know, still be able to do it.
Totally. And, you know, to leave you with our parting words, as we always say, not everything is gay, Rudy, but there is gay in everything, including J.K. Rowling's worst nightmares.